into it. Yes, equip. That was it. And yes, Aaron Gokul, sorry. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. But yes, equip, or however you pronounce that. Yes, that was it. And well, Linben Rhea says she's looking for. Don't fight me on the pronunciation, please. Rhea said she's looking for a practice buddy. So feel free there. Alright. Let's get into what the story actually. Equipe. Okay. Equipe it is. I would feel very weird saying equipe. Okay, French. It's equipe it is. But France might be in for some stiffer times because France is pretty near in Europe there to where some of this conflict to where some of this conflict is going down. And where some of this conflict is going down is Ukraine. And what does Ukraine have to do with all of this? Well, let's get into it. The former Guyanese president questions deafening silence of CARICOM amid Ukraine conflict. So the former president of Guyana has something to say about Ekip. Okay, over on Instagram, by the way, Miss Rhea, over on Instagram, I have been informed that it is actually pronounced Ekip. Just now? Yes, Ekip. So, Equipe, no. Ekip, sorry. And I feel more, personally, I feel more sophisticated saying Ekip. Yes. Ekip. Thank you, Valetzi, over there on Instagram. Much appreciated. Hello to you too, South Trinity 26 in Mass. Listen, I cannot argue about the proper pronunciation. I am the worst person to argue about that with. If you want to argue about biology, genetics, maybe I'll get into that. Yes. If you want to go down philosophy and even conspiracies, well, yes, I could get into that. But when you're talking about French, well, unfortunately, I'm not that guy. Unfortunately. A former Guyana president is questioning the deafening silence of Latin American and Caribbean leaders to the situation in Ukraine, where Russian troops have been gathering on the border of the European country amid fears of a possible invasion. Donald Ramuta, who served as head of state from 2011 to 2015, in a letter published in the Starbrook newspaper on Monday, warned that if war breaks out, we will all be affected. Ramuta said the situation reminds him of the Cuban Missile Crisis 60 years ago, when the world came to the very brink of nuclear war. Now, I spoke about this before when I was speaking about this World War II business coming, well, World War III business coming around again. And the very same thing that the US is kind of accusing Russia of now is what they reacted with possible, well, the very same thing Russia is accusing the US of now is the very same thing the US was willing to blow up the entire world for. Well, not literally, but they threatened when some files were released, some documents were released, I can't remember when exactly they were released, that allowed people to get into the what was before confidential files of how exactly all of this was dealt with. And what they realized was the world was actually literally one button press away from nuclear war. John F. Kennedy, JFK, because of who he was in terms of his general view on politics, didn't go as aggressively as his own generals wanted him to. Many people within the US wanted him to attack Russia because what happened way back then, Cuba, when they became communist, they linked up with the USSR, and as a matter of defense, because the US was attempting to take over Cuba and return them to capitalist glory, the USSR, Russia basically, started to stockpile weapons and missiles inside of Cuba, which is right next to the United States. And when the United States found out, they wanted to blow up the whole world. They wanted to get into some nuclear war. And now, a very similar thing is happening. I found this very interesting map. If you're over on my YouTube video, you would actually be able to see some of these maps and see what I'm talking about more directly. And if you're not, you can feel free to go over to YouTube, find me at Nathan Spring on YouTube, and do subscribe. You'll be able to see all of the other live videos that I wasn't super late for, and you'll be able to see what we usually talk about. And if you missed anything in any of the other videos or in this one, you'd be able to find it back there. Nathan Springer over on YouTube. But I found this very interesting graphic, an interesting diagram that points out, that shows the amount of new territories NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, NATO has a purpose. NATO was created to protect those Western European countries and the United States from the aggression of Eastern Europe, USSR, and China, etc., etc., etc. It was an alliance formed after the World War to make sure such a thing doesn't happen again. But if you look at this diagram and see NATO's expansion since 1997, you would see that NATO, which was initially mostly Western European countries, eventually kept pushing further and further and further east. Now, all that is left between NATO and Russia is basically Belarus and Ukraine, which is directly on the Russian border. Directly on the Russian border. And here's the thing. It's not just that they're entering this alliance. When you enter the NATO alliance, then NATO can build bases inside of your country and they can stockpile weapons inside of your country. And bear in mind, when people speak of NATO, like 99% of NATO is basically